Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. Notice there's another couple of people signing on, so I'm just going to give them a moment before we begin. Okay, we have a lot of material to cover in the hour, so I'd like to begin. This is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar, formerly known as Auto Tag, now Report Designer. Today is Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. My name is Eric Johnson, and I will be your Windward training facilitator today. I'm a technical support engineer here at Windward Studios. I've been here for a little over 6 months now. Maybe you've interacted with me through help desk tickets. Well, welcome everybody. You may have noticed that when you logged into the GoToMeeting webinar, you have a toolbar. The arrow that you see on the screen is put into the raise your hand icon. If any time during the webinar you have a question or are experiencing technical difficulties, please feel free to click that button to ask your question or notify me of anything that's wrong. The prompts I have for questions and chat are on my other screen, so I may not see your questions immediately. Usually I wait until the Q&A session at the end to answer questions, but I'll look now and again to see if anything has been raised. Again, this is the Intermediate Report Designer Training webinar. We're assuming that you've built some templates. They could have been very simple templates. We've assuming that you've installed AutoTag, that you know how to use the tags, that you know how to connect to your data sources. You know enough about Report Designer to get you started. And you may have joined us last week for the basic Report Designer training. To give you an idea of the kind of machine I'm working on today, I'm using Windows 10 operating system, which is 64-bit. I'm also using Office 2016, also 64-bit. And the version of Report Designer that I'm using is 15.2.340.0. This was just released Friday. You can always download the latest versions from our downloads webpage. Let's see a question. Let me. Yes, there will be access to the recorded webinar later. Somebody just asked the question. I'm sorry, it caught my eye. I mentioned I would look at it now and again. So yes, are we going to have access to the recorded webinar later? Yes, we will. Hope that answers your question. Okay, I want to give you a high-level overview of what we'll be discussing today. I'll go over some advanced features of the ForEach tag. We'll discuss conditional formatting, covering 2 types of conditional formatting. One, showing and hiding content using Report Designer tags, and a second type that formats output based on conditions. We'll go over the equation editor, where I'll show you how to add the sum function to a template. We'll discuss the if and switch tags and what the differences are. I'll show you an example of the import tag. And of course, the Q&A session is at the very end. So for the ForEach tag, let's review what it actually does. It does three things. First, it grabs a set of data, any set of data that you want to pull from your data source. Secondly, it loops through that set of data that you selected to work with. And third, it repeats all the elements between the beginning and ending ForEach tags. For today, I'll show you the importance of where to place the beginning and ending ForEach tags and show you the results of placing these tags in different ways. We'll also get into grouping data or nesting ForEach tags, and I'll show you how to group your data with nested ForEach tags. Okay, we're now going to move away from the PowerPoint presentation for a moment and get into actually working with templates. I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank Word document. Okay, within this Auto Tag Manager tab, under this Getting Started Guide section, we have the Samples button. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and this opens up our Getting Started Guide. And down here, under the Sample Templates, under this additional section, here's the Tag Tutorials SQLs and Tag Tutorial XMLs. Today, we're going to focus on the Tag Tutorial SQLs, as SQL is the greatest used data source, XML being the second greatest, and JSON the third. We don't quite have the tag tutorials for JSON yet. It's something we're working on. But again, we're going to be focusing on the Tag Tutorials SQL today. And to begin with, let's go ahead and open up this ForEach tag sample. And we're going to be focusing on this first sample right here, a ForEach tag without a table. It is possible to use the ForEach tag without a table. Yes, it is, as you can see from this sample here. And below this is a ForEach tag within a table. I want to point out a couple of things here first. First, I want to point out where you place the beginning and ending ForEach tags. And also I want to point out why the replacement of these is important when you loop through your data. But before we do anything else, let's go and select this ForEach tag and preview the data to see what we're working with. So with it selected, I'm going to go up to the Auto Tag tab and click on this preview button. Okay, and here we're returning everything from our categories table. We worked with that last week in the beginning webinar. Here we have the category ID, category name, description, and picture. So what is this alt tag that's next to the ForEach tag going to return? Let's go ahead and select it, click preview. And so this alt tag is just going to display the category IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, what's this other alt tag doing? Let's go ahead and select it, click preview. Okay, so this alt tag is just pulling the category names from the categories table. Yeah, we got beverages, condiments, confections, and so forth. And then we have our end ForEach tag right below it, right here. So let's go ahead and show you what this output's going to look like. So I'm going to go up here and click Output. Okay, I'm gonna go and split the screen. Okay, over here on the left is our template, and over here on the right is our output. So here's the results of our output. We have the number 1 in beverages, 2 in condiments on the next line, 3 dash confections, and so forth. So you'll notice, so how is this actually happening? How are we getting this output to be placed on different lines? How is it put in the category ID, the dash, the beverages, and then a line, and then the next one on then the next record on the next line? How is this actually happen? Why is it really inserting the next record on a separate line? So I'm going to go back here to our sample. And so the reason why that it was putting the next record on the next line is because we added this end for each loop on the very next line right here after the alt tag. So there's nothing after this alt tag right now. There's all this white space. Then the ending for each tag is on the very next line. So you can see this a little more closely of what's happening. I'm going to go to the Home tab and turn on the Show High Formatting. So you can see right after the last alt tag is this paragraph marker. So we're providing a carriage return after the alt tag, so we can add this end for each just below it. What if we were to go ahead and take away this carriage return? Let's remove it and place this end for each tag right after the final alt tag. Now, what will the output look like? Let's go ahead and generate that. Output. Split the screen again. Okay, now the output looks very different. Here we have the category ID, which is 1, a dash, and then the category name, beverages. Then immediately after this first record, it starts the second record. There isn't even a space anymore. This is telling, sorry, one second. Excuse me. Okay, so back to this. So here we have our first record, the category ID, a dash, beverages. And immediately after it, there's our second record. There's not even a space. So what Report Designer is doing, it's outputting the first record, continuing on, because now we have the ForEach right after the alt tag, and going on to generate the second record, which is the 2 dash condiments. And it's going to do this across the page till it reaches the end of the margin, and then it's going to go on down the page. And it's going to do this for as many records as there are in the ForEach tag. So this is why it's lining up on the exact same line for each one of these categories. It's because now we have removed that paragraph marker. Let's go ahead and change it back. So this is why it's important where you place the end for each tag. So everything between this for each tag and this end for each tags are being repeated each time it iterates through the loop, and having this carriage returns puts the items on the next line. Okay. Now, before we move on from this example, I like to point out the tag tree. So in here, in the Auto Tag tab, over here to the left is the tag tree button. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And this is very helpful, especially when you're reviewing templates that you haven't seen before. It lets you see and know all the tags that are set up in the template. I'm going to go ahead and expand the main story. And the main story is for the main document. If I had tags within the headers or footers, these would display differently. They would display separately. Sorry, you would see header, main story, and footer. But as all I have right now are tags in the main document, we have them all just listed under the main story. So to help you out when you're trying to locate a specific tag, you can double click any tag to go directly to where that tag is in the template. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this last ForEach tag. And as I do that, you can see over here, it brought me down all the way to the bottom of the template to that specific tag that I selected. And I just want to expand this and explain a little bit of what we're seeing here. So here's our outer ForEach tag, outer ForEach loop. It's this customer's loop. And then there's an inner ForEach tag connected to this outer ForEach tag. And this is where we're going to be talking about grouping. But then there's all these other tags here within it. We got our outer ForEach customer loop. We have an out tag. Here's our inner ForEach loop. It also has an out tag. Here's our end ForEach tag, which relates to this inner ForEach. And then we have this outer end ForEach tag, which relates to this customer loop. All right, well, so just below this is this tag properties window. Normally, when you're in a template, you would see within here a snapshot of the properties and the queries that are set up for each one of these tags. It gives you an ability to edit those relating qualities of the tags right here within the template. Using the webinar, for some reason, disables this view, but I just was using it earlier today, and this does display. We'll look at this a little bit later, a fuller version of the tag editor, but I just wanted to make note that if we weren't on the webinar and you clicked on any one of these tags, it would display the properties and also the queries associated with that tag. So let's get back to the sample. So what's actually going on here? So we have this outer ForEach tag right here, the customer's loop ForEach tag. And we want to group some data based on the company name. So let's go ahead and preview the customer loop to see what we're working with right here. So this customer loop, it's just returning, it's returning the customer ID and the customer name. Here we just have 4 records right now. Okay, next thing, between the beginning and ending ForEach tags is this company name alt tag. I'm going to go ahead and select it, preview it, and as the name describes, this is an alt tag for the company name. And here are a bunch of company names, all beginning with the letter A. Okay, next is another ForEach tag. This is our inner ForEach tag. Let's go ahead and preview this to see what it's returning. Okay, so this inner ForEach tag is returning all of the order IDs that pertain to a specific customer or customer ID. So let's say that you have a list of company names that you want to see all the orders for as it goes through the list. Well, this is exactly what we're doing here. We're going to be displaying the company name and then all the orders that pertain to that company. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this alt tag to see what it's going to be displaying. So this one is just returning the order ID. And that's it. So this alt tag, just in doing that. So even though we're returning all this additional information, all we're going to be displaying is just the order ID. Let's now take a look at how this will look in the output. When I click output, say yes to save. Split the screen. Then I close this tag tree as it's not needed anymore. I'm going to scroll all the way down. All right. All right, and here is the grouping for each tag that we've been talking about. So we have a loop over here in the template, and over here on the right, you can see the results of that loop. We have the number 1, the company name, Alfred's, and all the orders that are associated with the company name right here. Then it's going to iterate to the next company name, Anna, and display all of Anna's order IDs. And then once it's displayed all of Anna's, it's going to move on to the next record, the next company, which is Antonio, and display all of its orders, and so on. So now let's go ahead and look at this number 1 right here in the list. See how it's repeating the number 1 for each of these companies? Here's where we're grouping the orders under specific company names. Let's take a little closer look at this. I'll close the output. So how do we tie this inner for each loop to this customer outer for each loop? So with this outer for each loop selected, I like to point out up here in the ForEach Tag properties, again, we can always tell which tag we're selected by the properties up here. But I want to point out the variable, and this has a variable name of var name 10. And this variable is what Report Designer uses to identify this customer loop. So let's go ahead and just remember this customer loop is var name 10. Now I'm going to select this inner for each loop. I'm going to go up here and click on this wizard button. And this will open up our SQL wizard. Let's expand it a little. And over here in the center, we have our columns, and this is all the data that's being returned from the inner for each. We don't need to change that or deal with that right now, so let's just go ahead and minimize that. So down here in the filter section, this is where we tie that inner for each with that outer for each. And you can see it's already set up for us right here. So what we're doing is we're collecting the customer ID from the orders table, and we're setting that equal to the value of the var name 10, the customer ID value of the var name 10. And as you remember earlier, var name 10 was just the variable name for this customer loop. So having this customer ID from the orders table equal to the ID, customer ID from the var name 10, we can utilize the two primary keys with the identical customer IDs and connect the outer the inner loop to the outer loop. So now if I go ahead and click on this customer ID and click on the drop down, and I'll expand this var name 10. So this is the var name 10 loop with all the things that I can connect to. Here it's the customer ID and company name. Of course, we've been discussing the customer ID, so I'll go ahead and have that selected. So, and over here on the right, you'll notice within this data preview pane that there is that first customer ID, that ALFKI, and all the orders that pertain to that customer ID. So this is how you connect the inner ForEach loop to the outer ForEach loop through this filter section. All right, I'm going to go ahead and generate output again. I'd like to just discuss what's going on here. Let's slide down. Split the screen. Again, output is on the right. So I want to explain what is actually happening when we generate the output with the engine. So each report designer has a small .NET engine built into it. What's happening is our engine is completely stripping out the data from your template, then collects that data and then rebuilds from scratch, from top down, everything that's in your template. It shows the data that you wanted and it displays it how you formatted it within your template. So what's happening here in this example is Report Designer is collecting all the data from this customer loop, the outer ForEach loop, and all the data from within this inner ForEach loop. Report Designer ties it together, and when it produces the output, it says, okay, what's after this customer loop? And the first thing that it comes across is that numbered list with the company name. Then what does it do? It sees the inner ForEach loop, so it grabs that data and displays the out tag from this inner ForEach loop. It will do this for all the order IDs for this company. It will loop through showing everything between this beginning and ending ForEach tag. Then it will go on to the next line once it's done with the order IDs, and it comes across this ending ForEach tag, which then tells the engine to go back to the outer loop and collect the next record. And repeat the process. Iterate through the loop, give the company name, and the next orders, all the order IDs associated. Reach the end for each, go back up and iterate again. And it'll do that until all the records in the customer loop have been processed. So this just gives you an idea of how the engine is tearing down your template and rebuilding it from scratch after pulling your data from your data source. So this is how you group your data using nested ForEach tags. So the next thing I like to point out before leaving this sample is up here on the page above. So we've been creating ForEach tags using row-based formatting. We're now going to focus on how to create ForEach tags using column-based formatting. The ForEach tag can be used for the column major expansion. Okay, so there are three things that are different when you want to create columns instead of rows. This example above, up here, is typical when you're wanting to create role-based ForEach tag. So here, there's a ForEach tag within the table. It's going to loop through displaying the data and these alt tags. And then the end ForEach tag is outside the table. This is typically what you want to do. But here, in this next example, the column-based example, the end ForEach tag is inside this table. So let's go ahead and preview this ForEach tag to see what data we're working with. So here it's just returning the categories table. We've seen this quite a bit now. Category ID, category name, description, and picture. Okay, so what is this alt tag next to the ForEach tag going to display? Let's go ahead and preview it. If you were in the basic webinar, you heard me mention that I preview a lot. I always like to make sure I know the data I'm working with. So this alt tag is going to be returning the category names. So just beverages, condiments, confections, and so forth. So instead of creating a list top down of category names, we're going to go ahead and create columns left to right across the page. Let's take a look to see how this output looks. I'm going to scroll down to our column-based example. Okay. So, as I mentioned, instead of going top down, we're now going left to right, expanding the tables, creating new columns as there are records that are being processed. You may have also noticed that when you place the end ForEach within a table, it should typically create a blank row right here at the very end. But we're not seeing that blank row right now in our output. And let's take a look at why that is. I'll go ahead and close the output. So there's a couple ways to edit a tag. You can double click on a tag, or you can click on this edit tag button up here in the auto tag tab. So I'm going to go ahead and select this end ForEach tag and click this edit tags button. So there's not much here in the query window because the end ForEach tag is not really used to query anything. It's just used to tell auto tag when to stop looping through the data and repeating the elements. But within this properties tab, there's this delete row attribute that I want to talk about. And this attribute is currently set to true. So this will suppress the row on output. And this is why we're not actually showing that last blank row. Now, if I were to turn this off just by double clicking it and setting it to false, what will our output look like now? Let's go ahead and split the screen again. Scroll down to the example. Okay, so as you can see here, there's now a blank row. Before we didn't have this row, but now we do. And that's just because we turned that property, delete row, for our end ForEach to false. Now, the last thing that you need to do for column-based expansion is to change the property value for the ForEach tag to create columns instead of rows. Let's go ahead and close this. So let's go ahead and double click this ForEach tag to open up the tag editor. Now, this window that we see right here, this is a more robust window than what you would have seen over in the tag tree, the property section down here. And for this one, you have a bunch of different buttons up here that you can use. We have a preview button similar to what you see that we've been using. And when I click on it down here, you can see the results of the data that's being returned, category ID, category name, description, and picture, just everything we know is coming back in that ForEach tag. To the right of that is the wizard button, and that's just like the button that we used earlier in the auto tag tab. And this opens up to see the SQL wizard. To the right of that is the equation button, which I'll show you a little later. And this adds an equation to the tag. Then there's the next and previous buttons, which take you to the respective tag without actually leaving the tag editor. Then over here on the left, just like in the data bin, there's the tables, the views, and the store procedures that I have access to. And over here on the right is our query window, access through this query tab. Now your query window is probably white. If you right click within the window, there's this color scheme option. I'm using base 16 ocean dark. What is normal is this plain option. And then go ahead and click on this properties tab. And within here, you'll see some different attributes, properties under the advanced, and also some more under standard. But you may notice that this order attribute, it's set to columns. If I go ahead and click on that, you'll know there's a couple of options. There's legacy, and legacy is what is used by default. Legacy isn't much different from row. It's the original way we built the tag. The row attribute does a little more. If you want to delete a row with the end for each tag, you'll have to use this option. In our wiki page, there's more information on how legacy is different from row. So if you want to do a little investigation, you can always go visit our wiki page. But since we're expanding not by rows, but by columns, we'll want columns set for order. So with columns selected, I'm going to go ahead and click Save Tag. Generate the output. Just for reference one more time. And with that settings as they are, you can see the output here, and we still have its column-based expansion, and we still have this last blank row. So let's go ahead and just change this back. Then I go double-click the end for each tag, go to the Properties tab, and change Delete Row to True. Save it. Now, previous to that, we had this blank row. Setting that blank delete row to true. Gets rid of that blank row. So 3 things when you're setting up for column major expansion. One, you want to make sure your ForEach tag is set to column and that the end ForEach tag is within the table, and then that the delete row attribute for this end ForEach tag is set to true. Okay. I'll go ahead and go back to the slides for a moment. Okay, so we talked about legacy, row, columns, the different ForEach types. We talked about the delete row attribute, which deletes the row where the end ForEach tag is placed. We now like to move on and discuss the equation editor. So we have over 50 equations or functions available for you to use. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. So I have a sample template that I like to open. And this is, oh, opened on my other screen. Let me slide that over. Okay, so here in this one, we're actually going to add a sum function to this template, which will be used for the total sales amount of all the salespeople that we have records for. So you can see here we have our sales table. It has our sales loop for each tag, sales personnel tag, call numbers, leads generated, and sales amount. And then we have our end for each tag outside of the table, like we typically see when we're doing row-based expansion. Now, before we do anything, let's go ahead and take a look at what data is being pulled for this ForEach sales loop tag. Let's preview it. All right, so here it's just showing that we're returning the same things that we're showing in the out tags. We have the salesperson, call numbers, leads generated, and sales amount. Okay, but before we actually add the sum function, I want to show you how to display red text, conditionally displayed text. So in this example, we're going to display red text for those salespeople who are not meeting their quota. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this sales amount alt tag to open. Nope, that's the ForEach tag. There we go. So over here, var1, I'm just going to expand it, and var1 refers to the variable name of this sales loop. And these are all the values that's being returned. We have the salesperson, calls number, leads generated, and sales amount. I'd like to open this properties tab for the moment. And over here in the tag section, there's this condition. All right, just expand this so we can see it all. As you can see, there's already an equation set up for us. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. So with the condition row selected, I'm going to click on this ellipsis, the very end of the line. And this opens up our conditional formatting rule manager. So whenever you add an equation or whenever you want to evaluate data, you'll always want to begin with an equal sign. And so in this one, we have our equal sign, a $sign, a squiggly bracket, var1, which is referring to the sales loop variable name. And we're looking at the sales amount. And we're checking if the sales amount is less than 8,000. If it is, format it in a way. Okay, now that we have our equation built right here, what if we wanted to format it in a way? Like I said, we want to format it red. Well, I could add this format code right here, enter in the syntax in this format field, or I can click on this wizard button, which will open up the format options. And here we have options to format the text by italicizing it, bolding it, underlining, strike through. We can change the text color. We can change the text color of the background. And since we're working with a table right here, we also have ways to format that table. You can format the border, give it a different line style, line color. You can change the cell color and even change the alignment. But as we're only looking to format text, let's go back to the text tab for a moment. Okay, and so for this example, we're just going to change the color of the text to red for those sales amounts not reaching $8,000. So to do that, I've entered in the hex code in this text field for the color red. Fortunately, we don't have a color palette right now. That's something we want to add as an option. But for now, you'd have to use the text color, the hex color. You could go online, Google that, or possibly speak with your marketing department, and they may have the hex code for you. This right here, FF0000, represents the color red. So that's what we wanted to do. So we just want to change the text color to red when a condition's not met. So when we click OK, you can see here is our formatting. And if we wanted to, we could even add a new rule by clicking this Add Rule button. We can delete a rule by clicking that Delete Rule. But as this is all we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And when we do, it populates the condition that we just set up there. I'm going to click Save, Save Tag, and let's go ahead and click Output to see what this will look like with the formatting applied. Turn off the Show High Formatting. Split the screen again. Okay. So you can see here that any sales amount less than 8,000 is displayed in red. So this is one way to conditionally format an alt tag for output. Oh, I see a question that popped up. One moment, just so I can read this. Good question. The question was, for formatting, are you able to have the less than 8,000 be a parameter or another field within the query? I'm not actually sure on that right now. Let's try to get back to that at the end, see if that is possible. That's a good question. I haven't actually tried that or had a person ask me that question before, so I'm not sure, but I'll look into that for you. Whoever asked that question, if you could please let me know your name, that would help me to make sure I get that answer to you. All right, so as you can see here, we have any sales amount less than $8,000 displayed in red. All right, let's now go ahead and add a sum function to this table so that we can total all these sales amounts from these salespeople to see what the grand total is. So how do we add this sum function? Well, to do that, we're going to need to create a new row in our table underneath this first row. So I'm going to go ahead and select this ForEach tag and delete it by using this delete tag button up here. And I now need to add a second row, another row. So I'm going to click on this plus button to create myself a new row. So now we're going to do what I told you not to do earlier when it comes to row-based templates. And that is, and since this is a row-based template as we're moving top down, and I'm going to go ahead and add the ForEach tag inside the table. Again, something that's not normally done. Okay. Now that we got our ForEach tag, let's go ahead and add some text to this column to define what we're going to be displaying. So we want to total up all the sales amounts. So I'm going to go ahead and enter total there. Format it a little bit. Go to the Home tab, make it bold and right aligned. Okay. And now I need to add an alt tag next to this total, or wherever you want it to, but I'm going to add it next to this total for our total of our sales amounts. Go back to the auto tag tab, click on tags and choose alt tag. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this alt tag to open our tag editor. And this time I'm going to go up here and click on the equation button. And this will opens our insert function window. Here, have a bunch of different categories you can choose from. You can choose all or limited to date and time, math and trig, statistical, database, text, logical. I'm going to go ahead and choose math and trig as we're going to be working with the sum function. And this is alphabetized, so we're going to scroll down and let's go ahead and select this sum function. And when you do that, down here, it gives you a description of the function. So the sum adds all the numbers in a range of values, exactly what we're looking to do. Then I'll go ahead and click OK. And this will open up our functions argument window. And here's our equation right here. As you remember, we always start with an equal sign to evaluate, which was done for us. Then there's our sum function and nothing between the parentheses. So let's go ahead and now add to this equation. So what are we going to sum up? Okay, we know what we're going to sum up. We can either enter that right here in the number 1 field, or we can go ahead and click on this wizard button. And doing that opens up the SQL wizard. Let's expand the tables and then the sales tables, as that's what we've been working with. So we want to sum up the sales amount. So to do that, all we need to do is just drag the sales amount to the columns table right here in the middle. Now you can see in the data preview pane, we have all our sales amounts, exactly what we want to sum up. So that's all you need to do is just drag and drop from the data pane to the column section. Once that's done, we'll go on and click OK. You'll now notice to the right of this number 1 field is a value, and this is the first value that's being returned. There's also the grand total down here, not formatted, but it is the grand total. And now our sum function has data in it. So we're selecting the sales amount from the sales table. And that is exactly what we want to see. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now here's our query that we've just built through the equation editor right here in the query tab. I'm going to save this. And since we're going to print out number values, let's go ahead and format this data. So I'm going to put my cursor on that alt tag and click select tag. And this way I know I'm selecting the whole tag. Click format data. So just like in Excel, we can click on currency and we can define how we want that currency to look. We want 2 decimal places, yep. Negative numbers, yep. Okay, this is what we want. So let's go ahead and apply it. Close this. And as I mentioned before, with it clicked and selected to make sure we have the whole thing, let's also format this. So let's make this bold as well. Okay. And so let's go ahead and generate the output now and see our sum function in use. Yes to save. All right, so here's our table right here with that extra row. Since we added that n for each within the table, it's giving us this blank row here. But we utilize that blank row by adding the grand total for the sales amount, $64,609.51. So this is a great sample for showing you how to conditionally format the text for certain values and also adding a sum function, one of the many functions within the equation editor that you can utilize. All right, let's go back to the auto tag or the auto tag manager tab. We'll look at the auto tag. They both have the samples button. They both go to the same thing. We're going to go ahead and look at another sample right now. So now I want to show you conditionally formatting using the if tags and switch tags. So first, let's go ahead and open the if tag tutorial, which is this one right here. Just notice the time. I'm gonna be a few minutes over, but I just want to make sure I get all this information to you as I feel it's important. Sorry that I am going over, but I'd just like to continue on. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on this if tag tutorial sample. And so this gives us step-by-step instructions on how to utilize the if tag. But I like to look at this first example right here, this if, out, and end if tag. Now, the if tag is perfect when you want to show or hide specific elements within your template based on some condition within your data. Let me go ahead and select this if tag. Let's preview it. Okay, well, let's hold on a moment. So, all right, so we're going to evaluate what's in the if tag. And if it's true, then we're going to display everything between this beginning and ending if tag. If it's false, it's just going to skip over this alt tag and display everything after this ending alt tag, and then carry on through the rest of the template. So let's go ahead and take a look at this if tag to see what it's evaluating. So in this if tag, we're evaluating if 1 is less than 2. This is a simple equation. Since 1 is less than 2, it's going to return true. So this means that we're going to display this alt tag right here. If this was false, it would have skipped the alt tag, this alt tag, and displayed whatever comes next. Now let's go ahead and look at this alt tag. what are we actually going to be displaying? Let's preview it. So here we're just providing text that states 1 is less than 2, exactly what it is. Let's go ahead and look at the output. All right, so here we're just displaying in simple text, blue text, that 1 is less than 2. So this condition was true, and we displayed the value in the alt tag. Okay, now let's look at this next example. This output is indicating 3 is less than or equal to 4. Why is that showing? Let's go ahead and preview this if tag. So all we're doing here is we're evaluating is 3 greater than 4. Of course, 3 is not greater than 4, so it's evaluating to false. Okay, and since this first if tag is evaluating to false, Report Designer is going to skip over this first alt tag and move to the else tag. And it will provide everything after the else tag to this ending if tag. Right now, this is a simple alt tag, but it could be used to show or hide tables or even other information. Say, for example, you have a template where you need to show more information for residents that live in California, as opposed to residents who live in any other state. This would be a good way to do that. So if it's California, you can, if it's California, display whatever you're looking to display. If it isn't, then you can display a subset of that. So it doesn't matter what comes between the if, else, and end if tags. We're going to show or hide certain elements of your template based on conditional formatting. So if we were to preview the alt tag right here after this else tag, since this if tag evaluates to false, this alt tag is just gonna display 3 is less than or equal to 4. And this is exactly what we see over here in the output. So if the first if tag was to evaluate to true, this alt tag would be displayed. Let's preview it to see what it would display. And it would just display text 3 is greater than 4. So that's the if tag. And you'll want to use the if tag if you just have 1 or 2 conditions or choices that you want to evaluate. But what if you have 3 or more conditions that you want to evaluate? You can use nested if tags, which is what you see right here. You have an if tag, an else tag, then there's another if tag, an else tag. But instead of using nested if tags, we suggest using the switch case tags. Let's go ahead and take a close look at our switch case sample. I'm going to go back here to the samples, open the Getting Started guide. And so there's a couple of samples for the switch tags. There's a switch tag and switch tag 2. I'm going to go ahead and open up the second one. And so here we just have another table containing customer information. Let's go ahead and preview this customer's ForEach tag so we can see what we're working with. And here we got the customer ID, first name, middle name, last name. Here we have quite a bit of information that we're pulling from the data. And then in each column, we have a couple of alt tags. There's some first name alt tag, last name, address, city, state, postal code. But then over here in this country column, this is where our switch case tags have been added. And all the switch tag does is it just tells Report Designer when to start evaluating case tags. So here's our beginning switch tag right here, and here's our ending switch tag. Now you may notice that the switch tags are a little bit darker than these case tags. And the lighter shade is for the case tags. So these case tags right here are evaluating the country. And it's checking. If the country belongs to Canada, then display the Canadian flag. If the country is USA, the American flag. Mexico, the Mexican flag. Australia, the Australian flag. Let's go ahead and double click on this tag, this Canada tag, to kind of talk about what's happening. So here we have our equal sign. We have var1, and var1 is just referring to our customer ForEach loop. And we want to look at the country region name from that customer loop, and we're going to check if it equals Canada. If it does equal Canada, then we will display the Canadian flag. And we'll do this for the rest of the countries. And if it equals one of them, it'll show the flag. And as soon as it meets one of these cases, does country region equal Canada, it'll display the flag and it will exit the switch. Then it will move on to the next item in the list, which is this ending ForEach tag, and loop through again, showing all this information and the specific flag for the next customer record. Let's look at this output to see what's actually showing. Let's click on output. Split the screen. And so the first record in the list, John Yang, is from Australia. So we're displaying the Australian flag. If I scroll down, we can see that Lauren Walker, Washington State, and USA. So the country flag displayed is the American flag. And here we have even the Canadian flag for British Columbia. So here we're evaluating 4 case tags. So there's 4 questions or conditions that we're asking, and that's going to either show or hide certain values based on the customer's country. And right now we're just showing or hiding this flag image for each record. So that's the switch case tag. And last thing I want to show you is the import tag. So back to our samples. And we have 3 import tags. Okay, we have our import tag with HTML, and our import tag image. I'm going to go ahead and click on this first one, as it gives us a little of everything. So it looks like we're importing an image here. There's a PDF file that we're going to import. We can import a docx file, Word file, text, HTML. But let's take a look at the output now that we know how the template's set up. generate an output, split the screen. Okay, so here's our output on the right, and here we are displaying the image. And what you see over here in our template is just an image preview. This is actually a tag. If I were to double click on this image, you can see the path right here in the query window, and this is the file that's being returned. It's just showing you the preview in the template so you can see the image size and layout upon output. Now, you may have noticed that there's no additional content for the PDF input. The only way that you can input PDF is by outputting to PDF. So if we were to output to PDF instead of Word, this would display the PDF input right here. So anytime you're trying to import PDF, you have to output to PDF. And doing that right now, PDF. And it opened on the other screen. And here's our input file right here, PDF. So when you want to output the PDF, again, if you want to input PDF, you must output the PDF. All right, let's go back to the slides. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, I showed you the if tag and how it evaluates when it's true. It shows everything between the beginning and ending if tags. If you have multiple evaluations or conditions that you're trying to check against, for instance, 3 or more, you'll want to use the switch case tags. You may want to take a screenshot of this of the slide while we're on it, as it contains a lot of resources that you can utilize. So if you want to look up anything from our knowledge base, you can do this at wiki.windward.net. We're constantly updating the wiki. We're actually revamping it completely, and we've just started to roll out our new wiki. If you can't find what you're looking for through the wiki, you can reach out to our amazing support team at support.windwardstudios.com, or you can also email them at support@windward.net. So if you have a question that you can't find the answer to, go ahead and contact our support team. If you want to retrieve your license key, you can go to our store.windward.net. And if you want to make any changes or have feature requests that you want added to the engine or report designer, you can do this at ideas.windward.net. And you can also visit our user center for more resources, and that's at windwardstudios.com/user-center. Okay, there's going to be a survey at the end of this webinar. Please feel free to fill it out truthfully, and any feedback that you can provide will help me and the attendees with the next webinar. Let's go ahead and look at some questions. I do have a question that came up. Let me just read that to get familiar with it. Okay, question was, can multiple functions be used together? Yes, they can. Good question. Let's see. Let's go back to the equation editor for a moment. So open up this out tag. So here, there's actually 2 functions being used. Here's the data function, and here's the sum function. One thing about this, if if you do want to use two functions, when you're using the equation button, it only creates one. You can only use it to create one function. Data is a little different. That's just translating this sum function to data so it can be used in this alt tag. I did have a template not too long ago that I was working on for someone where they needed to concatenate 2 bits of data from their database. And then once that string was formed from the concatenation, they needed to translate that into, to encode that for URL. So what I suggested was if they come in here, they just delete that for a moment. So the first thing they needed to do was concatenate. So I just press the C button, and that brings you automatically down to those. So first thing I suggested was to use this concatenate, select the 2 things that they want to concatenate together. So let's just, for this example, let's just make up any 2. Click OK. So sales amount and salesperson, let's say they wanted to concatenate that. So this gives them the first function on how to concatenate. So with that in mind, I had them copy that down, save it off to a notepad. Then I had them coming, then for instructions, I had them go back to the equation editor. They needed to encode for the URL. So then I had them select that and just put something in there. Click OK. OK. And then with that function that we created first, I then had them come back in here and add this function, which was the concatenate function, right inside the UR function. So you can't quite use the equation editor to create multiple functions, but you can use that to determine the syntax or how to set up the function and then build it accordingly. Good question. All right, that was all the questions we had today. Thank you for that question. Good question. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and goodbye now.